Hey everyone, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So, here's the deal. I am about to make a video about 1/4 of one slide at BlizzCon, but Blizzard laid out some bait. So you're damn right I'm going to bite and take the bait. Here's the deal. After talking about patch 8.2's content, they went on to tease the story content of patch 8.2, essentially what would be happening with our main characters, the likes of Sylvanas, of Saurfang, of Anduin and Jaina. But, well, take a look at Sylvanas' right hand, because Sylvanas currently, in this screenshot, is wielding Xal'atath. You know, Xal'atath, Black Blade of the Empire, the artifact weapon whose Shadow Priests were roaming about with throughout Legion. And this is fairly major, because it also ties into really so much of the stuff that they're hinting and suggesting with the plotline of Sylvanas. And I suppose this also could be a pretty major driver of future content, so it really is worth delving into. Blizzard certainly put that there, the expectation that many of us would be talking about it. So here is the background. So in patch 8.1, there are two raids. There's the Siege of Dazar'alor, but then there's also the Crucible of Storms, which is set in the big Storm Priest temple in Stormsong Valley. And of course, it's very old god themed, probably foreshadowing a little bit of Nazjatar and a little bit of patch 8.3. Now, as a part of a questline that has been data mined leading up to this, we essentially go and we get Xal'atath. Now, she had essentially she'd taken in all of this corruption from Sargeras, and she was weakened, so we power her up, we get her back up to speed, we get seemingly betrayed by a bunch of new NPCs that we meet, and then Xal'atath seems to sort of betray us, but in a pretty spectacular way. Like, she asks for a gift from N'Zoth, she says a bunch of fairly interesting things, she even hints stuff about Nazjatar, but the thing that really matters, that's really big, is that she gets, we think, a physical body. Actually, we pretty much know there is a Void Elf NPC data mined that is Xal'atath. So, Xal'atath, in 8.1.5, in the Crucible of Storms raid, well, at least the storyline surrounding that raid, she gets a physical body. Now that means that Xal'atath is no longer in the Black Blade of the Empire. Now, I did see some speculation, people were looking at this BlizzCon slide, and they were kind of saying, hey, look at the Black Blade, it doesn't have an eye in it anymore. Well, once you pop open Model Viewer, you flip the blade the other way, and that's just the side of the blade that was shown in the screenshot. The eye probably still is there. But yeah, we know that this is going on with Xal'atath. She pretty much seems to say that she's taking off for a bit. She's fully aligned with the Black Empire, but she's taking off. She talks about the cosmos opening up to her. And of course, she did a bit of a tease for Nazjatar, which is nice and spicy. So, that means that Xal'atath is temporarily out of the picture. But this Black Blade of the Empire is left behind. And who ends up picking up this Black Blade of the Empire? Sylvanas. What does this mean? Well, it could mean a lot of things. First of all, we need to talk about the Black Blade of the Empire itself. So, this Black Blade is a vessel that is capable of containing an old god. Now, perhaps not an old god at like full power, but maybe the essence. It's hard to know the specific mechanics of an old god, if they have some sort of essence like a consciousness or a soul, but what we know from Xal'atath and that blade is that Xal'atath was contained in the blade, and Xal'atath was a legit, full-fledged old god. Yes, she was very weak, she was kind of, put into this blade way back in the days of the Black Empire, but in terms of her category as a being, she was an old god. So that means that this Black Blade has the power to contain an old god, pretty much. And it's fairly interesting that Sylvanas, in patch 8.2, is going to be running around with a weapon that can contain an old god that we know is now vacant. And of course, given everything else that's pretty likely in this expansion, with N'Zoth seemingly being teased for 8.3, that seems pretty major. Now, before we get further into this, we need to step back a little bit and talk a little bit more about some of the 8.1 narrative content. So, in patch 8.1, at one point, a whole bunch of the characters pretty much realize Sylvanas is, she's a bit whack. She's a little bit mad, a little bit nasty. Why on earth would Vol'jin think that she should lead the Horde? So, a bunch of characters go and they ask various forces of death. You've got the likes of Aegir and the Lich King and Bonsamdi, of course. And all these forces of death, they say that they didn't lean into Vol'jin as he was dying and whisper in his ear that Sylvanas should be the one to lead the Horde. So when Vol'jin says that, the spirits have spoken and he never would have thought Sylvanas would be the one to save them, but she is, well, it wasn't here, it wasn't Lich King, it wasn't Bomsamdi. Maybe it was Muzala, as I covered in a previous video, but that might be unlikely. And that, to many people, suggested that it was N'Zoth. It was N'Zoth that whispered into Vol'jin's ear, and, when he was weak and dying because of this wound, that's, how he ended up, mistakenly perhaps, saying that Sylvanas should be the one. Now that is a little bit odd because, well, Sylvanas has no love of the Void. The Void has no love of her. Why would N'Zoth want her to be on the throne other than to sow chaos? So if it was N'Zoth who placed her on the throne, then this is clearly his plan backfiring, and him not taking Sylvanas' strength and her individuality into account. But if something else or someone else put Sylvanas on the throne, then she would be working against the Void, with her interests being aligned with this mysterious third party. And remember, in regards to the Void, Sylvanas, whenever she meets Ilaria, Sylvanas says she's an abomination for what she's done to herself. That, Ilaria has signed herself up with this Void-aligned force, something that will inevitably consume her, and even Ilaria seems to, well, have a lingering feeling that that is the case. And then the Void in Illyria reacts, obviously, terribly to Sylvanas. So Sylvanas being a puppet of N'Zoth, not really sure if that's actually the case. And do remember how Blizzard are building up the forces of death as a narrative in World of Warcraft. I've been talking about this a lot in recent videos. There's so much interesting lore, and I actually have, in maybe 2 weeks, a video about the Shadowlands that delves into that even more. But it's becoming increasingly clear to me that there is some sort of third force of death. There's something else going on that's really important, and Sylvanas seems to be working for them. Now, we've got to think, what did Vol'jin see? Because he must have seen a vision of Sylvanas somehow saving the Horde. Maybe Vol'jin's vision involved Sylvanas going around, maybe, imprisoning an old god in this dagger, something like that. It's fairly hard to know. So, looking at this, Sylvanas is going to be running around. She has this dagger that has the power to capture an old god. Okay, or at least, maybe if there's a weakened old god, she can kind of yank it in there somewhere. Sort of hard to know how the mechanics of that would work, but she has this super powerful artifact. And she seems to be aligned with these forces of death. Now, the way that they are pitching all of this is kind of interesting because, according to Blizzard, Jaina and Anduin act as, and this is almost a direct quote, the linchpins of the Alliance's attempt to stop Sylvanas' evil plan. Now, from a matter of perspective, yes, just about anything Sylvanas does is evil to characters like Jaina and Anduin, but, well, could Sylvanas be doing something flat-out evil, trying to harness that old god power like what Garrosh did? Could she be trying to destroy the old gods, but in a manner that's very, very risky? It's kind of hard to tell. And then when we think about the other stuff that's going on with the Horde, remember that in 8.1 they give us a choice. We either side with Sylvanas or we side with Saurfang. And then when we look at this 8.2 presentation on the Horde side, what do we see? We see Saurfang, we see Sylvanas. Could it be that that is another narrative choice that we end up going with? Now, I think it would be really cool if, the Alliance had maybe 1 or 2 war campaigns and then the Horde kind of had one that forked off in different narrative paths. I could see some Alliance players saying, hey, that's unfair, the Horde technically get more content than we do. But, I mean, as an Alliance player, I would be okay with the Horde getting more content if it meant that Blizzard were, exploring a unique story possibility that's only possible because of the current Horde story. I don't think that would be a bad thing at all. I think that could be extremely interesting. Maybe you could have some sort of thing going on where player characters who are aligned with Saurfang are sort of just seeing what Sylvanas is doing as being unhinged and risky, but the players who side themselves with Sylvanas are seeing like, yep, she is taking big risks, but you know what? The stakes are massive and she has to do this. And the way that I could see all of this going, now that I've just seen Sylvanas with, an old god prison in her hand, the way that I sort of see this now is that Sylvanas is almost going off on more of a personal mission with this thing. And I have to wonder if essentially if she'll do a little bit of a Kerrigan and she'll sort of throw away her, her past life and maybe leave the Horde to focus on this thing. Maybe the narrative takes her in that direction. And I suppose in that case, like, she could be misunderstood, but she still would be the hero of her own storyline, and that could make her a very interesting character. I don't want them to kill off Sylvanas or get rid of her. I just don't think that she's maybe the best narrative choice for the leader of the Horde, given that this is an MMORPG and that is a figurehead for players. But it seems like Blizzard, because of what they've done with Saurfang and that player choice in 8.1, it seems like they have kind of made the best of that situation. Overall, extremely interesting. Plus, it would be quite funny if essentially Sylvanas put N'Zoth into the Black Blade of the Empire, and then N'Zoth manipulated his way around as the Blade, and then Xal'atath comes back, and then Xal'atath pretty much sees, because N'Zoth, it seems like N'Zoth put Xal'atath in the Black Blade originally way back in the day, so that would be a really cool, like, flipping of the table between the two characters, or, you know, shoes in the other foot sort of situation, which would be pretty cool to see. Anyway, there you go. Sylvanas is going around with some real spooky stuff in her hand, and I'm pretty sure that the lore is going to be pretty major. Let me know what your theories are about this down in the comments. I would absolutely love to hear. So yeah, be sure to do that. Thank you very much for watching this and all the other BlizzCon coverage on the channel. And with that, I will see you soon.